Before we start, if you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and it genuinely means the world to me. This story is long, it's detailed, and I think you'll want to stick around for the entire thing, so please subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know you're here. Now, let's begin. The text arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday in March. I was standing in the kitchen of the house I had built for 16 years making tea when my phone lit up with the words that would change everything. You have 24 hours to get your things and leave. This is my house now. Don't make this difficult. The message was from David, my ex-husband of 8 months. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 48 years old, and until that moment I thought I understood what it meant to be betrayed. I was wrong. The house he was claiming ownership of, the one we'd purchased together in 2008, the one I'd renovated room by room, the one where our daughter had learned to walk, that house was in both our names. Or so I thought. Apparently David had other ideas. I set the tea down and read the message again. No punctuation errors, no hesitation, just a clean, deliberate ultimatum delivered at a time he knew I'd be home alone. Strategic, calculated, the kind of message a man sends when he's already made arrangements. He's confident we'll hold up. That's when I stopped being sad about the divorce and started paying attention. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, Martin Rothschild, the man I'd hired 6 months earlier when David first asked for a divorce. Martin had been patient with me then, understanding but firm. You need to protect your interests, Sarah. I've seen this movie before. I hadn't listened well enough back then. I'd been too heartbroken, too focused on making the divorce amicable, too willing to believe David when he said we could work things out fairly. That period of my life is important to understand because it explains what I was about to do. 16 years. That's how long I gave David. I met him in 2008 at a client event for the wealth management firm where I worked as a senior advisor. He was charming, ambitious, and broke. Literally, he was driving a car with a check engine light that had been on for 2 years and wearing a suit he'd bought at a discount outlet. I was comfortable. Not wealthy. I'd built my career through intelligence and hard work, not family money, but stable. I had a house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, a 401k, a daughter, Maya, from a previous relationship who was 12 years old and deserved a calm home. David promised stability. He promised ambition. He promised that he'd build himself up, that we'd be a team, that he'd take care of us. For the first 7 years, he tried. He worked in middle management at a logistics company. Nothing spectacular, but steady. We renovated the kitchen in 2012. We added a deck in 2014. Maya graduated high school. We took a family vacation to Hawaii. Then David met Marcus Chen at a networking event. Marcus owned a real estate development company. He was successful, visible, the kind of man who got mentioned in the Portland Business Journal. And he took an interest in David. I remember the moment David came home and told me about it. His eyes had changed. There was something hungry in them I'd never seen before. He thinks I have potential, David said. He's thinking about bringing me on as a partner. I should have been happy for him. I was, in a way, but I also felt something shift. The David I knew became secondary to the David he wanted to be. The man who'd promised to build a life with me became a man obsessed with building a company. The partnership fell through. Marcus invested David's savings, a sum I'd helped him save over 7 years, in a real estate venture that collapsed when the market softened in 2019. David lost everything. We recovered. I helped us recover, pulling extra hours at work, using my own investment accounts to stabilize our finances. But David never forgot what he'd had, even briefly. He spent the next few years chasing that version of success again. Different ventures, different ideas, each one consuming more of his time, more of his attention, more of his focus. Our marriage became something that happened in the background of his ambition. By 2023, we barely spoke. We lived in the same house, but in separate spaces. I slept in the master bedroom. He slept in the guest room. We had dinner together maybe twice a month. On those occasions, he talked about his latest idea while I listened and made supportive noises. In January 2024, I finally said what I'd been thinking for a year. I think we should separate. David didn't argue. That's what told me everything. A man truly invested in his marriage fights. David just nodded and said, "Probably for the best." We agreed to an amicable divorce. I was determined to be the mature one, the reasonable one, the woman who handled her personal failure with grace. I hired Martin but didn't push hard on details. I was willing to split assets fairly. I suggested we sell the house and divide the proceeds. And then, 8 months into the process, after Martin had assured me the paperwork was nearly finalized, David sent that text. "You have 24 hours to get your things and leave. This is my house now." The moment I hung up with Martin, I understood what had happened. "He's claiming the house was his separate property," Martin said, and I could hear the anger in his normally controlled voice. "He's saying he inherited it from his mother before you were married, but that wasn't true. David's mother, Eleanor, had passed away in 2010, 2 years after we bought the house. She'd left David a small amount of money, maybe $30,000. We'd used some of it for closing costs. Most of it had gone into renovations." "He's lying," I said. "Of course he's lying, but he's also prepared. He's filed paperwork with a judge claiming you were never on the deed, that your name was added later as a convenience but has no legal standing. He's claiming separate property classification under Oregon law." My stomach tightened. How long would that take to sort out? "Normally, several months, maybe a year, depending on the judge's docket. But Sarah, listen to me. He's escalating. That text message, the 24-hour ultimatum, that's not legal pressure. That's psychological pressure. He's trying to force you out before we can file a response. So what do I do?" "You don't leave," Martin said firmly. "You stay in the house, you document everything, and you call me back in 1 hour. I need to make some calls first." I hung up and stood in my kitchen. The kitchen we'd renovated together, the one where I'd taught Maya to bake, the one where David and I had first kissed 16 years ago. And I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months. Clarity. For 8 months, I'd been moving through the divorce in a fog of sadness and guilt. I'd blamed myself. I'd told myself that David deserved better, that our marriage had just run its course, that we'd grown apart. I'd accepted every compromise Martin suggested. I'd been cooperative, reasonable, and mature. But this aggressive, calculated grab for the house, this was different. This wasn't a man grieving the loss of a marriage. This was a man who'd been planning something. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. First, I looked at the mortgage documents. Original purchase agreement from 2008. Both our names on it. Both of us are applicants for the loan. Both of us listed as owners on the deed. Then I looked at the property tax records, updated continuously. Both our names continuously, every single year for 16 years. Next, I searched my email archives, thousands of emails, conversations about paint colors, contractor quotes, Christmas decorations, property tax bill notifications. 16 years of evidence that this was a shared home, a shared investment, a shared life. David's claim that I was never on the deed was probably false. But here's what made me stop and think harder. Why would he make a claim he must know was false? The answer came to me about 30 minutes later when I checked the county records online and saw the filing date on David's claim. He'd filed it 3 days ago, Monday morning, before sending the text, before the ultimatum. He knew I'd fight back. He knew the claim was weak, but he wasn't trying to win a legal battle. He was trying to win a psychological one. He was trying to force me out before Martin could file a counterclaim. He was trying to establish residence and occupancy advantage while I was still dealing with the shock. He was betting on my fear, my guilt, and my desire to avoid conflict. That's when I started paying very close attention to what David had actually done. Over the next few hours, I found 3 things. First, I discovered that David had been meeting with a lawyer, not to divide assets fairly, but to contest every single thing we'd agreed to. Payment plans for our daughter's college fund, the modest spousal support arrangement, the division of retirement accounts. Second, I found a draft amendment to our mortgage that David had prepared, attempting to remove my name as a co-borrower. It had been prepared 3 weeks ago and was waiting for my signature. Martin had never seen it. Third, I found the real estate records for a property David had been researching, a commercial development in the Pearl District. He'd been gathering financing documents, meeting with investors, building a business plan. He needed capital to fund this venture, and the fastest way to get capital, I realized, was to take the house, the only asset he could claim, the only thing he could leverage. Once he had sole ownership, he could refinance the mortgage, pull out equity, and use that money to finance his venture. I wasn't just an obstacle to David, I was a resource, and he'd decided to extract the maximum value from me before moving on. When Martin called back, I told him everything I'd found. "This changes the calculus," he said. "This isn't an amicable settlement anymore. This is a man who's trying to defraud you out of significant assets while making you feel like you're the unreasonable one for objecting. I'm going to be direct. You need to protect yourself immediately." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we need to move faster than he expects. It means you need to document your occupancy of the house. It means we need to file a response to his claim before a judge can issue an order. And it means, Sarah, listen to me, you need to think about what leverage he has and what leverage we have." I understood what he was implying without him saying it directly. David had leverage because he had a legal claim to the house, however weak he had filed it first. He had an attorney. He was willing to be aggressive and potentially illegal. What did I have? I was about to find out. "I'm coming to your house right now," Martin said. "Don't let him in if he shows up. Don't answer his calls. And Sarah, take pictures of everything, every room, every piece of furniture. Document that you live here. Document that you maintain the property. Document your presence." After I hung up, I spent the next 2 hours doing exactly that. I photographed my clothes in the master bedroom closet. I photographed my personal items on my nightstand. I photographed my name on bills and bank statements spread across the dining room table. I photographed my daughter's photos on the mantel, photos I'd chosen, arranged, and maintained. I photographed my books on the shelves. I photographed my car in the driveway. I was establishing a visual record that I was not a visitor in this house. I was an owner. I was a resident. I was an integral part of its existence. Then I did something else. I called my bank and spoke to a representative about the mortgage account. "I need to verify the current status of the property at 4847 Riverside Drive," I said. The representative pulled up the account. "Co-borrower Sarah Chen and co-borrower David Chen," she confirmed. "Both names on the loan, account in good standing." "I need to put a flag on any requests to modify this account," I said. "Any requests to remove a borrower, to refinance, to change the terms, I need to be notified immediately and contacted before any action is taken." Is there a dispute? The representative asked carefully. Potentially, I said. I'm going through a divorce. I want to be protected. She noted my request. It took 30 seconds. It protected me significantly. Next, I called the county recording office and asked about filing a notice of claim. If I want to establish my ownership interest in a property that's currently being disputed, what's the process? The woman on the phone explained the steps. It was simple. I could file a notice of claim, a legal document asserting my interest in the property for about $150. How long does it take to process? I asked. Usually 3 to 5 business days. What if I bring it in person? Same day, usually. We can record it the same day you file it. I wrote down the address. Finally, I went to the filing cabinet in my office and pulled out 16 years of financial records, mortgage statements, property tax bills, utility bills, insurance documents, renovation receipts, every single piece of paper that documented our shared investment in this property. I organized them chronologically and photographed every single page. By the time Martin arrived at 6:30 p.m., I had created a comprehensive archive of evidence, proving that I was not only a resident of the house, but a legitimate co-owner with years of documented financial contribution. This is good, Martin said, reviewing the photographs on my laptop. This is very good, but Sarah, I need to be honest with you about our timeline. Even with this evidence, even if we file immediately, we're looking at a contested property claim that could take months or even years to fully resolve in court. How long until he could get a judge to order me out? With his current claim? Honestly, probably not very long. A judge could issue a preliminary ruling forcing you out while the case is pending. He'd argue that since he's claiming sole ownership and you're not the legally documented owner in his narrative, you're essentially a trespasser. It's a weak argument, but it's possible. My hands were cold. So he could get me out? Potentially, but here's what he can't do. He can't get you out before we file our response, and he can't get you out without a formal court order. And any court order would have to account for your documented ownership interest. Sarah, what he's trying to do is fast-track this. He's hoping you'll panic and leave on your own. The moment we file, the moment a judge sees the documentation, his case gets much weaker. When can we file? Tomorrow morning. I'm going to work tonight. We'll file first. I nodded slowly. And what do I do tonight? Martin looked at me carefully. You live your life as normal. You stay in this house. You have dinner. You sleep in your bed. You don't give him any indication that you're afraid or planning anything. Understood? I understood perfectly. David called at 8:47 p.m. I didn't answer. He texted at 9:15 p.m. Sarah, I'm being serious. You need to leave tomorrow. I'm not going to ask again. This is final. I didn't respond. He called again at 10:30 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was short. Call me back. Now. I didn't. At midnight, he sent another text. I'm coming by tomorrow morning to change the locks. If you're still here, I'm calling the police and having you removed as a trespasser. This is your last warning. That message I forwarded directly to Martin with a note, received at 12:04 a.m. Martin's response came at 12:06 a.m. Perfect. Document every threat. Save everything. I'm filing at 9 a.m. sharp. You stay in the house. You don't open the door for him. If he shows up, you call the police first and tell them you're a resident defending your property from an intruder. I set an alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep. I didn't sleep much. Mostly, I lay in the darkness thinking about 16 years. Thinking about the renovations I'd paid for. Thinking about the garden I'd planted. Thinking about the memories that lived in the walls. Thinking about the fact that David had decided all of it was worth sacrificing for a real estate venture. The sun came up at 6:47 a.m. I was already awake. At 8:47 a.m., Martin sent a text. Filed 10 minutes ago. You're protected. Now wait. At 9:15 a.m., David's lawyer called Martin. According to the voicemail Martin left me a few minutes later, the conversation was brief and to the point. My client has received notification of a counterclaim filed this morning. My client disputes this claim entirely and reserves the right to pursue legal remedies for fraudulent filings. Translation: they were panicking. By 11 a.m., David's lawyer had filed a motion requesting an emergency hearing within 48 hours to determine temporary occupancy rights. By noon, Martin had filed a response stating that I was a documented co-owner with 16 years of financial contribution and occupancy, and that any temporary order should recognize my right to remain in the home pending full adjudication. At 12:30 p.m., David showed up at the house. I heard his truck pull into the driveway. I heard him get out. I heard him walk to the front door. He didn't knock. He used his key. "Sarah," he called out, "we need to talk about this." I was in the kitchen. I didn't come out. "Sarah," he walked through the house. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floors we'd chosen together. I heard him come into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the kitchen island where we'd shared 16 years of breakfast conversations, and I realized something. I didn't recognize this man anymore. "You need to leave," he said. "I'm not joking around anymore. I own this house. My lawyer has filed a claim." "You don't have a legal—" "My lawyer filed a counterclaim," I said quietly. 2 hours ago. The court has recognized my ownership interest and my right to remain in the property pending adjudication." His face changed. "You did what?" "I filed a response to your claim, with documentation going back 16 years proving that I'm a co-owner, that I paid for half the mortgage, that I maintained this property, that my name is on the deed." "Your name was added to the deed after—" "No," I said. "My name has been on the deed since day one. I have the original purchase documents. I have every single mortgage statement. I have 16 years of proof." He ran his hand through his hair, and I saw the calculation happening in his face. He was trying to figure out if he'd miscalculated or if he could still salvage this. "Look," he said, and his tone shifted to something conciliatory. "Maybe we approached this wrong. Maybe we got a little aggressive. But Sarah, I'm building something. I need capital. I need this house. Can't we work something out? I could buy you out. I could—" "No," I said. "You don't even know what I'm going to—" "I don't care," I said. "You decided that your ambition was more important than our marriage. You decided that you'd rather lie and manipulate and grab for things than be honest about what you want. And now you're surprised that I'm protecting myself." He stared at me. I could see him trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I wasn't. "You can't stay here," he said, and now his voice had gone cold again. The court will decide based on evidence, and the evidence strongly favors someone who has lived here continuously for 16 years and paid half of everything." He left about 10 minutes later without saying anything else. But as he was walking out the door, he turned back and said, "You know what? You're going to regret this. I'll make sure of it." I didn't respond. I just watched him go. That evening, Martin called with an update. The judge scheduled a preliminary hearing for tomorrow at 2 p.m. He's treating this as a temporary occupancy matter pending full resolution. The fact that you're both on the deed and both have documented financial involvement means he's not going to remove you based on David's claim alone. But Sarah, I need to tell you something. "What?" "David's accelerating. His lawyer just filed an additional motion. They're claiming you're refusing to cooperate with the divorce settlement. They're asking for temporary child support modifications. They're filing a separate claim for spousal support. They're bundling everything together to create legal pressure. Why would they do that? Because they're desperate. Because David's case on the house is weak and he knows it. So he's opening up new fronts, creating more legal complexity, hoping that you'll get overwhelmed and just give him what he wants to make it all go away. I thought about that for a moment. He's trying to force me to negotiate from a position of weakness. Exactly. What do I do? We will show up tomorrow. We demonstrate to the judge that you're not the problem here, that you're cooperative, documented, reasonable, and we let the system work. But Sarah, this is going to get messier before it gets better. The preliminary hearing took place in a small conference room in the Multnomah County Courthouse. Present, myself and Martin, David and his attorney, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s named Rebecca Palmer, and Judge Harold Morrison, a man in his 70s who looked like he'd seen every type of domestic dispute in existence. Judge Morrison reviewed the filings carefully. He read Martin's documentation. He asked David's attorney to explain the basis of the separate property claim. Rebecca Palmer did her best. She argued that the house had been purchased with money David inherited from his mother, that David's name should have been listed first on the deed, that community property laws in Oregon provided certain protections for separate property that had been commingled with joint assets. It was a creative argument. It was also weak. Judge Morrison asked a simple question. Is Mr. Chen's mother's name on the deed? No, Your Honor. Is there any documentation showing that the funds used for the down payment came exclusively from the inheritance? The original mortgage application shows. It shows both applicants, both of you, he said, looking at David. Mr. Chen, have you maintained this property? Yes, Your Honor. I've contributed. Have you paid mortgage payments from funds you earned after the marriage? David's attorney put her hand on his arm, but he'd already hesitated too long. The answer was obvious. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morrison set down the documents. I'm not going to adjudicate the full ownership question today. That will require a trial with full discovery and evidence. However, on the question of temporary occupancy, I find that Mrs. Chen has a documented ownership interest going back to the original purchase and has maintained continuous residence and financial contribution to the property. Her name appears on the deed, on the mortgage, and on every relevant document for 16 years. Mr. Chen's claim of separate property is disputed and will require a full hearing to address. Pending that hearing, I'm ordering that Mrs. Chen has the right to remain in the property. If Mr. Chen attempts to change locks, remove her possessions, or otherwise interfere with her occupancy, he will be in contempt of court. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor, I said quietly. David's attorney nodded. David said nothing. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm ordering that all financial matters, spousal support, child support modifications, asset divisions, will be handled as part of the full divorce proceeding. I won't have one party using multiple legal proceedings to create pressure on the other. This case is consolidated. We'll have a trial in 60 days. Both parties will submit full financial disclosures within 2 weeks. Any attempt to move assets, hide funds, or otherwise complicate the accounting will result in sanctions. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, both attorneys said. As we were leaving the courthouse, David's attorney pulled Martin aside. I could see them talking. I waited. When Martin came back, he was almost smiling. What did she say? I asked. She told me that David is having second thoughts about the house claim. Apparently, he's also worried about the financial disclosure requirement. He wants to negotiate. Negotiate what? That's the question. But Sarah, I think David just realized that he played this wrong. The preliminary hearing was supposed to be his advantage. Quick, dramatic, before you had time to organize. Instead, He gave us time to document everything. Now he's facing a trial where he'll have to explain where all his money went, what he's been doing, and why he tried to defraud you out of a house you clearly own." I felt something then. Not triumph exactly, more like the release of pressure I didn't know I'd been holding. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we make him an offer he can't refuse." Over the next 2 weeks, David's attorney contacted Martin multiple times with settlement proposals. Each one was remarkably generous. To me, first proposal, David would sign over all claims to the house in exchange for $50,000 to help with his new venture. Martin rejected it immediately. "She doesn't owe him a settlement on property she already owns," he told David's attorney. "That's not a negotiation. That's a ransom demand." Second proposal, David would accept $100,000 in spousal support in a lump sum payment in exchange for waiving any future claims or contests. Rejected. Why would she pay him to stop contesting property she clearly owns? Third proposal, David would accept a modified divorce agreement that gave him the equity in a rental property we owned jointly in exchange for complete waiver of the house. Martin took that one seriously. "It's worth considering," he told me. "It's actually a fair value exchange. You keep the primary residence, he gets the rental property, you both move on." "How much would the rental property be worth?" I asked. "Roughly equivalent to his equity in the house. Maybe slightly more. It's a fair deal." I thought about it. 16 years of memories were wrapped up in the house. I'd renovate it room by room. I watched my daughter grow up there. I'd built a garden that I was proud of. Giving it up would be giving up a part of myself. But staying tied to David through litigation, spending money on lawyers, spending time in courtrooms, spending emotional energy on someone who'd tried to defraud me, that was also a cost. "Tell him yes," I said, "but with conditions." Martin raised an eyebrow. "The rental property transfers to my name only. He gets his portion of the equity paid out at closing. No complications, no joint ownership, complete separation." "That's smart," Martin said. "What else?" "He pays my legal fees." "That's not typically—" "He started this. He made it aggressive and contested. He tried to defraud me. If he wants a clean settlement, he pays for the legal work required to get me there." "How much are we talking about?" $17,000, roughly. Martin smiled. "Let me propose that to his attorney." The response came back within an hour. David's attorney said, "My client will accept these terms on one condition, a non-disparagement agreement. Mrs. Chen agrees not to discuss the details of the settlement or the circumstances of the divorce with anyone." I read that and immediately said no. "Sarah, non-disparagement is pretty standard." "Not in this case. He tried to steal my house. He sent me threatening messages. He attempted to have me removed as a trespasser from my own property. If he wants a clean break, he gets a clean break, but he doesn't get to hide what he did. I'm not going to agree to be silent." Martin called back David's attorney. The response was interesting. David's attorney said that if I wouldn't agree to non-disparagement, David's client was willing to include a formal written apology as part of the settlement. A written apology from David, admitting to what he'd done. "That's unusual," Martin said when he told me. His attorney basically just admitted that David was in the wrong and is trying to limit the damage to his reputation. That's actually quite significant. "Send me the proposal," I said. When I read it, I saw it clearly. David was capitulating completely, not just settling, but surrendering, admitting fault, acknowledging that his claim to the house was illegitimate, recognizing that his conduct during the divorce had been improper. The apology was brief but complete. "I acknowledge that I made a claim to the property at 4847 Riverside Drive that was not legally or factually supported. I also acknowledge that I attempted to pressure my ex-spouse to vacate the property through threats and ultimatums that were inappropriate and improper. I take full responsibility for the costs and legal fees incurred as a result of my actions. I apologize for this conduct. It was signed by David and notarized. What does this mean? I asked Martin. It means he's protecting his reputation. It means he's worried about what might happen if you discuss this publicly, how it might affect his business relationships, his ability to get financing, his credibility with potential partners. This written apology is basically insurance against you, telling people what he tried to do. I thought about that. The written apology had significant value to me, but what it really represented was David's recognition that I had power, that I had evidence, that he couldn't control the narrative anymore. Tell him I accept, I said. And add one more condition. What? He can't attempt to contact me directly for any reason. All communication goes through our attorneys. And if he violates that condition, the apology becomes void and I'm free to discuss the details of the settlement publicly. The response came back. Agreement. We signed the final settlement papers 3 weeks later. The closing on the rental property happened 30 days after that. The deed transferred to my name only. David received a check for his equity portion, a substantial amount, enough to fund whatever venture he was chasing. The final piece arrived on a Thursday morning. The signed apology, now part of the legal record, filed with the court as part of the settlement agreement. I kept a copy in a folder on my desk. It's been exactly 1 year since David sent that text saying I had 24 hours to leave his house. The house is still mine. The mortgage is still in my name. The deed still has my name on it, and it's still the only name there. I finished the renovation of the master bathroom last month. I'm planning to redo the kitchen next. Not with someone else's input, not according to someone else's timeline, but on my own terms, in my own time. David's real estate venture, the Pearl District development that he needed my house equity to finance, fell through 6 months ago. According to mutual friends who still maintain contact with both of us, the project ran out of funding and his investor partners moved on to other opportunities. I don't know if my refusal to give him the house equity was the deciding factor, but I suspect it was significant. He's still living in Portland, still working in real estate, though at a smaller scale. He and I have had 0 direct contact in 12 months. Everything goes through attorneys, as specified in the settlement. Maya, my daughter, asked me once if I regretted how things ended between David and me. We were sitting on the back porch looking at the garden I'd spent years cultivating. I regret that he decided our marriage wasn't worth being honest about, I told her. I regret that he chose deception over conversation, but I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret refusing to be pushed around. And I don't regret keeping this house, not because I need to win, but because I deserve to keep something I've invested in. She nodded and said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." That meant more to me than keeping the house. What I learned through this experience is something I wish I'd understood earlier. Your life is not something you negotiate away in the name of peace. Your assets are not compensation for someone else's ambition. Your silence is not the price of civility. I also learned that sometimes the best response to someone trying to take from you is not to grab back, but to simply stand still and let the system work, to document what's true, to be patient, to refuse to panic. David thought he could intimidate me out of my own home by giving me an ultimatum. What he didn't understand was that I'd already decided to stay, that I'd already started building the case for why I should, that I was 3 steps ahead before he'd even sent the first text. The house I left that morning of March 15th, when David gave me 24 hours to vacate, was only left for 12 hours. I drove to Martin's office, we filed the counterclaim, and I came back home. I slept in my bed. I woke up in my house. I made tea in my kitchen. I never actually left. And that's the thing David never understood about me. When I decide to stay, I stay. When I decide to fight, I fight quietly, methodically, and in ways that count. He thought he needed the house more than I did. He was wrong. He thought I'd panic when threatened. I didn't. He thought I'd negotiate from weakness. I negotiated from absolute clarity about what I deserved. Today, the house is paid for by half his effort and half my own. The garden is maintained by my hands. The memories that live in its walls are my own. The future I build here is entirely mine to shape. Continue 8:43 p.m., and somewhere in this city, David is living with the knowledge that he tried to take something that wasn't his to take, and he failed. That failure is written into a court document now. It's part of the legal record. It's something that follows his name in any serious background check. It's a scar on his reputation that a simple non-disparagement agreement can't fully hide. He tried to leverage a 24-hour ultimatum into a real estate grab. All it did was prove that I was stronger than he gave me credit for. All it did was ensure that the last thing David and I ever did together was exactly what he deserved. Nothing. No compromise. No settlement that benefited him. No mercy for his ambition. I didn't need to take anything from him. I just needed to keep what was already mine, and I did. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where someone is trying to take advantage of you, whether it's property, money, or anything else, remember what Sarah did. She didn't panic. She didn't negotiate from fear. She documented everything, consulted professionals, and let the truth speak for itself. Please hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's being pressured or manipulated or treated unfairly in a relationship, please share this with them. I'll be back next week with another story. Until then, remember, your worth is not negotiable and your silence is not a gift. Thank you for watching.